That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Memory. Not the Liam Neeson film, but the 8th film directed by Michel Franco, which premiered in competition at the 2023 Venice Film Festival, where it picked up the Best Actor award for Peter Sarsgaard. It is being released courtesy of Ketchup Entertainment on December 22nd, 2023.
This director?
Michel Franco.
I'm familiar with their last film?
No, well, his 2020 film New Order we reviewed, but he also since then did Sundown with Tim Roth. He's a very divisive filmmaker. I know I have a few friends that seem to not like any of his films, but he's often trying to push buttons, often very provocative. His debut, Daniel E. Anna, is very interesting. I like After Lucia. April's Daughter is a highlight for me. He broke into English language filmmaking in 2015 in Chronic, starring Tim Roth, who of course he worked again with in Sundown.
This film. Sylvia is a social worker who leads a simple and structured life. This is blown open when Saul follows her home from their high school reunion. Their surprise encounter will profoundly impact both of them as they open the door to the past. I don't like that premise. What's your pull quote?
A thorny, brittle, but surprisingly compassionate melodrama from Michel Franco, led by Chastain and Sarsgaard as lovers doomed by subconscious undercurrents.
Mine. Memory is awkward and dreary in a way that left me unsatisfied. So we are split on this one because you liked it much more than I do.
Yes, I did. Well, for one, usually if you're familiar with his filmography, you're waiting for that shoe to drop of something really terrible to happen. So the first time I saw this, I probably had a lot more anxiety waiting for something really nasty to happen. And this feels like the first time where he seemed to care about the two main characters.
So Sylvia, Jessica Chastain, she works at an adult daycare center. This premise says she's a social worker. I didn't get the sense that's what she does. But she works at this adult daycare center, and we can tell immediately that she's affected. She seems very concerned about...
Well, it opens where she's kind of graduating after 13 years from AA.
We know that she has a alcohol addiction, or that she's sober, struggling. I don't know. She has a kid, don't know where the dad is. She seems to have a strained relationship with her family, like her sister. She goes to her high school reunion.
It's actually her younger sister's high school reunion. Olivia.
And this man approaches her and sits down. Saul, played by Peter Sarsgaard, and she seems super creeped out and just gets up and leaves the reunion. She sees him follow her home, and he spends the night in front of her house.
And it's raining.
So the next morning when she gets up, she looks outside and he's asleep outside. She recognizes that maybe he's a vulnerable adult. So she calls his emergency contact. They pick him up. They ask her if she'd be willing to watch him during the day.
Which is his brother Isaac, played by Josh Charles.
Because he seems to like her and she was kind to him. And I guess they know that she works at an adult daycare center. So she's the perfect find. But as she's spending time with him at his home, watching him, I don't know that I think a romance develops, but they get close.
They do, but before she agrees to take on this position, she has, you can tell that there's something bothering her about this man, not only that he followed her home. So initially she goes to Josh Charles's home and says, oh, can I meet with Saul and take him for a walk? And she leads him out into the woods and confronts him and says, when I was 12 and you were 17 or 18, you and this other guy, Ben, were sexually assaulting me and making me drink at school.
And then we find out that maybe isn't true. Her sister tells her, that Saul is not the guy who you think he is, because he started at that school in 1986 and you were already withdrawn from that school. So, I guess your memory's off.
Right, which I really like is they're both obsessed with these memories of the past. He has no current short-term memory capabilities, and she, that it calls into question our own memories of the past and what we remember, the details we remember from it.
But anyway, after she is fine with him not being the one who sexually assaulted her, she decides to take the job, and she watches him. They end up getting close in a way. And then she decides to quit. But then Saul comes looking for her, and then immediately they develop a relationship. Like, because Isaac, the brother, shows up and he's mad. Like, what are you doing? My daughter told me that you and he were canoodling on the couch. And she's like, well, he can stay here. So then I don't know how much time has passed, but they end up acting like they're a couple. And then another turning point is we find out that Sylvia and her mother don't communicate.
And her mother's Samantha, played by Jessica Harper.
Because Sylvia's daughter appears to be like 13 or 14.
She's 13.
And we find out that the mother, the grandmother, Sylvia's mom, has never met this girl. So their relationship is real strained. And then towards the end of the film, there's a moment when it all comes to a head where Sylvia confronts her mother in front of her sister and her brother-in-law and says, you know, Dad used to sexually assault me. And you just pretended like it wasn't happening. And then the mom is like, you know that's not true. You lie about everything. You have this mentally unstable man living in your house with your daughter, and you want to tell me about being a bad mom. And that's when the sister pipes up and says, actually.
Since we're already talking about that scene, I really like that scene because especially for Merritt Wever as the sister Olivia, because if you focus on her, her body language shifts to such a degree, because the confrontation is Chastain. Sylvia confronts her sister and says, are you not going to say anything and back me up that you know this was happening? And you watch her go through transformation. It's like the physicality of that moment, it's trying to speak up to her mother is, I don't know. I thought that was some really good performance work.
But to finish the story, because the daughter is witnessing this exchange you just described, when they get home, the daughter feels bad. Like, now she understands why her mom's the way she is. So this girl goes to Saul's house, absconds with him.
Well, something else happened between them.
What happened?
Peter Sarsgaard starts living with them, and because Sylvia has to go to work, she leaves him alone, and he has an accident and is brought in by the authorities to the hospital. And that's when he is taken back in by his brother, and they take his phone away. Sylvia's devastated, can't get a hold of him. So the daughter, moved by that, goes to kind of abduct him from his home.
And anyway, she brings him back and they live happily ever after, I guess.
They don't. I don't think that they say
No,
that
but I mean, the film just ends. Like, he shows up, she's happy to see him, and then the film ends.
But I think that's what's so tragic about it, because it ends on this one uplifting moment, but you know they're doomed. You know that these two are not going to be able to be together. It's almost, I kind of equated it to almost like A Star is Born, like she's coming out of her shell, but he's going down. And it also reminded me a lot of Flowers for Algernon.
My first note is this movie should be called Awkward Moments. It's just dreary. Every interaction between every character is awkward. Every actor, I guess, is being directed to deliver their line. Like, everything just seems awkward in a way that was unrelenting. But because we talked about how, like, this is melodrama, but it's done in a way that is not my favorite. Because it's just like there's so much happening, and I don't really connect.
To me, that's very curious. It's like melodrama, but in a vein of austerity.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah, clearly that you didn't like this, but I think there's a lot.
I don't think it's bad filmmaking, and I don't hate this movie. I was surprised to hear that you liked it so much.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Sarsgaard and Chastain are really good, but the character work that both of them do, there's this sex scene that's of course really awkward, and I believe that a part of this person wants that, but then if you're looking at her face, which I think is why we focus on that scene so much, it's doing these things. She's doing these things that I don't know, I found so compelling and striking. And then also, probably coming from a family that had dynamics where certain people aren't talking to one another, I thought all of this made a lot of sense. And then the guilt that people carry that are kind of stuck in the intersection of those people that aren't talking.
I think because I couldn't tell the story straight through, it feels. If I say the greatest hits all at once, like this woman who was sexually assaulted by her father as a kid, plus some boys at school whose mother doesn't believe her, whose sister won't back her up, she's a single mom, don't know where the dad is, she falls in love with a man with a memory disorder who she accused of raping her at one point, but now she doesn't think so.
But I think that's part of the reason her guilt at doing that and realizing that she was wrong allows her.
But what the point I'm trying to make is, if you say all of it, and she's an alcoholic, when you that was sort of it was all a lot. Like there's just a lot going on, and all of it's very interesting. but none of it had time to breathe. So I just kind of felt like, what is happening? Everyone's acting weird. None of this makes sense. Like I didn't feel like I understood any of these characters, or I don't even understand why I think Sylvia wants to be with Saul.
I think that, well, I think she has a need that hasn't been met.
She's afraid of men.
She has a need that hasn't been met, and I think this man in particular, probably because of his disorder, is also a safe bet.
I get the sense that she feels disarmed. Yeah.
There's disarmed, and there's an expiration date that to me, someone like this wouldn't even be willing to allow herself to. She's not really even dealing with that part. But I find all of that very fascinating. There's a moment when Sarsgaard starts sleeping over. At first, he borrows the daughter's bedroom, but then when he starts sleeping with Sylvia, there's one night he gets up to go to the bathroom, and he forgets which door he came out of. And instead of making the wrong choice, he sits outside. And I think it's like, there's just these small, subtle moments that I think make this more than all of the sort of details that are going on the surface, in my mind.
Sylvia is at this reunion and she is so miserable. And then I just had a hard time understanding her character. I don't understand if she wants to be happy. I don't fully understand. It just feels very basic to me. Like, oh, this woman she's an alcoholic and she seems very fragile. And then she gets home and we see she has 5 locks on the door. We see her set her alarm like 4 times. So it's like, okay, I get it that she's paranoid. She doesn't feel safe. And then you have this man who, like you said, he probably does symbolize like a version of a man that feels safe to her, like one who can't. I mean, I don't quite get why she feels disarmed by him, but it's clear that's what's happening. I just, yeah, even like her dealing with her daughter, because she seems like a loving mother, but then she also seems kind of unreasonable, but not too unreasonable. But her actions with this man seem odd. Even when she goes to visit him after she rescues him, and then we realize she's only doing that because she wants to confront him about the assault. I thought that was strange. Like, this family just let this lady take their vulnerable adult.
Well, there's interesting things we learn about them too, because it's towards the end where Sarsgaard makes a comment to his brother, like, this is my house. So
yeah, we don't understand Saul's situation.
So I think both of them kind of have to bear witness to, and I think that's also another reason why she feels so strongly about him, is she has to see his brother try to kind of usurp control over him, and she doesn't like that.
It's interesting that it appears like Saul or his brother, they have money, and then just Sylvia's family has money, like her mom and her sister. But Sylvia seems like she's struggling, because we get a scene where the mom is kind of like, ooh, she lives in the ghetto. You know, like, if she needs money, I can give it to her.
Well, and also Sylvia buys her daughter an iPhone at one point, and the daughter's like, how can you afford this? It's like, oh, because I got a second job.
Right.
And we're forgetting that Sarsgaard has a niece, too, played by Elsie Fisher from the film 8th Grade, who doesn't have much to do, but she bears witness to their affections, which causes the fallout with Josh Charles.
So even though I didn't care for this movie, and I had a lot of notes about what I think would have been a better story, the good thing is that the better story is all in this movie. I just wish that we would have taken out pieces. So, like, one thought was, what if we just focused on this woman, Sylvia, falling in love with this man with this memory disorder, and how, and I know there were other movies with similar-ish plots, but I felt like their connection could have been really strong and interesting to watch without all the other baggage. I also thought there's a really interesting scene with I keep calling her Jessica. Sylvia, Jessica Chastain's character, shows up at her sister's house to pick up her daughter. And her sister and husband have children. And earlier in the film, we see that the sister wants to dance around the fact that Sylvia is an alcoholic. So when Sylvia gets to the sister's house, one of the kids...
They're playing Monopoly.
One of the kids says, how come I never see you drink?
And she goes, would you like a beer?
Sylvia says, well, because I'm an alcoholic. And that's when the brother-in-law goes, oh, no, we don't talk about that here. And so I thought, it would be such a cool movie if we took these same people and focused on how this person struggling with their sobriety and being successful in it has to deal with the people around them not being able to reconcile how they feel about it. Like, I thought that was really interesting. So there are a lot of really interesting things in this movie.
But that also makes sense how, because in the confrontation with Jessica Harper, where Chastain says the word pedophile, and again, that brother-in-law is like, we don't use that word in this house. It's like,
Right.
so we're not living in reality about things that are happening to our loved ones.
So I think that, like, that family dynamic and their backstory could have made for a full movie.
Sure, yeah.
I guess I'm saying I didn't dislike these people, the story, the filmmaking, none of it. It's just like I wanted more of one thing. It just all feels like there's so much happening, and it doesn't quite make sense to me.
Sure, but I was fascinated too by outsiders' perspectives of things in the U.S. Like so seeing Brooklyn out from the eyes of Michel Franco as lensed by a cinematographer. I really like Yves Cape. I don't know. I just thought it also had a really an unexpected vibe. Really? For me.
Wow,
for watching a lot of new films set in New York, in the streets of New York, and people living there. It felt like I don't know, like there's something that feels off about it in a way, but in a way that I think is compelling.
A line that struck me was when Sylvia is asked, like, why are you no longer working with Saul? Her response is, things got complicated. And I was like, really? Where? What happened? We didn't see anything. We just see you, they're watching a movie together. They both start crying over this movie that makes them sad. And then we see them sort of like wake up from a nap. And they were just napping like one shoulder on the other. Like, what happened? What complicate? I wanted to see those complicated feelings. I wanted that to be the story. Like, there was nothing.
See, I felt like I do see her complicated feelings. She's running away.
From what?
From complications, how she's feeling. She allowed herself to be vulnerable and fall asleep with this man that she's caring for, and there was a witness to it.
But fall asleep, they were upright. It's not like they were in bed. They were on the couch upright, and they just dozed off.
Sure, but they're crying together, and I think they're crying for different reasons, because she's watching Basquiat survive an overdose, because that's what she's crying about. He just wakes up from a nap and starts crying with her.
Yeah, because he's not even watching the movie.
Well, because and I think that's why we get that earlier scene where he's like, I can't watch a movie because from one scene to the next, I don't remember what's happening.
Saul just doesn't listen. And his brother, it seems like he's at his wit's end because he's telling him, like, you need to stay home. You can't do these things. And now that he doesn't have the help of Sylvia, he's at home alone. And we see his brother leave and say, like, stay here. If you need anything, call me. And the minute the brother walks out, Saul walks out. Mm-hmm. But there's a big post-it on the door that says, do not walk out.
Yes, clearly it's sometimes ambiguous about what he knows he's doing and what he doesn't. But also that's kind of the scary part of it.
Their relationship just happens so fast. Like she invites him over, and then they're like sleeping in the same bed together. She makes herself his emergency contact. I wish I would have had context as to how much time had passed.
Sure.
Because it feels like it's just a day or two, which makes her seem crazy.
No, it's longer than that, but we're led through that by the dialogue, because at first she leaves her job at the daycare and then she has to get it back. And
oh, sure. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
What would you give this movie?
Per my written review, I'm maintaining a 4 out of 5.
Oh, wow. I didn't care for this one, but I don't think it's bad filmmaking. I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.